Thanks for coming out.
Yeah! Robert!
When I was in high school, I worked at this deli. Not some shit bodega or a goddamn Subway. A real deli with real Italian combos and stuff. It was probably the most satisfying job I've ever had. Making sandwiches for people doesn't sound like fun, but when somebody tells you that they've just eaten the greatest BLT of their lifetime and it's all thanks to you, well, that's a big fucking ego booster. Believe it or not, it was way better than my previous job of packing and stealing pills at a pharmacy. Even one of my teachers said, "Wait, you traded drugs for bologna? Are you okay?" Never been better. There's something rewarding about pouring your blood and sweat into a place that you actually care about. Literally, I put my finger through the slicer one day while I was making this guy a corned beef sandwich. He saw the whole thing, blood everywhere, and simply asked if we could, hurry up with that sandwich. When I went to the hospital, they were like, "Where's the other piece of your finger?" I told them the truth. Some dude ate it. I got mad respect for cannibals like that. Of all the characters I had the privilege to serve alongside at that deli, nobody was more fascinating than the cook, Chris. Chris's only teeth were the kind that were missing. His only articles of clothing said New York Giants on them. His only favorite band was Twisted Sister, and his only friend was his Rottweiler, who was a great defense mechanism when he got into scuffles with the local crackheads. Chris was many things. Filthy, stinky, and ugly as a botched abortion. He was so ugly, in fact, that my boss wouldn't let him out in the front for fear that he would scare off the customers. His fear was totally justified. Chris was unapologetically crude, especially towards women. He had no limits, no shame, and no taste. He'd often pull me aside to point out the cans on that one or whatever, at which point I'd turn to behold the most hideous creature I'd seen that day. And then he'd say something like, "Man, I'd love to eat the turds right out of her ass." Okay, Chris, have fun with that. And he had a million lines like that, and he'd always throw them out there like I'd never heard them from him before. To his credit, some were actually pretty clever. Sometimes he'd get real close to me and say, "Hey, you ever been eating that pootie tat sauce and get a little whisper in your ear?" Meaning, had a girl ever farted in my face while I was going down on her? Well, thankfully, no, but I got the feeling that this happened to Chris a lot. I only got that feeling after months of doubting there was any truth behind the stories he would tell me, but eventually I had to accept the fact that he was having sex with multiple women. I can't imagine who these women were or what their major dysfunction was, but like they say, there's someone for everyone, I guess. Sometimes he'd say, "Hey, you got any nudie pictures of your girlfriend?" And when I said no, he'd say, "Wanna buy some?" Hilarious. Or he'd say, "Hey, if you see your girlfriend, can you tell her to stop telling people my dick tastes salty?" For the last time, Chris, I don't even have a girlfriend. My personal favorite, though, was how every night, without fail, he'd grab an 18 rack of Bud Light, usually his second of the day, though I guess he was at least concerned about his figure. Throw it over his shoulder and shout on his way out the door to nobody in particular, "Tell your wife and my kids I said hi." Oh, did I mention, Chris was the most hardcore alcoholic I've ever met in my life. He was so drunk. So fucking drunk all the time. The guy was made of booze. Vapors of alcohol emanated from his person like some kind of angelic aura. If you held a match up to him, he'd probably go up like a California fire. I used to put the TV on and find some trashy talk shows to watch or whatever, and Chris would wander over later on and change it to the Discovery Channel. Then he'd stand there staring completely enthralled by a sloth climbing on a tree or some shit. I like to think he was really into learning, but I doubt it. Chris's permanent residence was one of those hourly rate motels up the street. And one time he disappeared for like a week, so my boss finally went looking for him. And when he got to Chris's apartment, the door was unlocked but would barely open for the simple fact that there was a barricade of beer cans in front of it. My boss was a grizzly kind of guy, and he still had trouble bashing his way in, only to find that the entire room was filled with several hundred, maybe thousands of empty beer cans. He waded through cans up to his shins until he finally found Chris passed out amongst them. He woke him up and said, Chris, you're late for work." And Chris was so far gone that he decided to quit drinking. A novel idea. He went about 3 days before everybody, including himself, was fed up with his miserable, sober personality. We made him start drinking again. Somebody came in one day and gave my boss a bottle of wine. He sure as hell didn't drink no wine, so he gave it to Chris, who chugged the whole thing right in front of us. Then he went for a walk in this blizzard we were having that night. And somewhere along the way, he decided to lay down. He passed out and was half buried in snow before some cops found him a few hours later. If he wasn't so drunk, he would have died. He came to work the next day and I asked him what the fuck happened. He laughs and goes, "I wanted to make a snow angel." For all his stupidity, Chris had some rare moments of profundity. They'd usually come when we were having a smoke out back or something, and he'd start getting strangely philosophical about some deep shit, be it life or love or the world we live in. Whatever it was, I'd always find myself wholeheartedly agreeing with him, and somehow having a meaningful conversation with the guy who usually just wanted to know if I liked it up the butt. I came to the frightening realization, though, that we had the exact same views on everything people ponder in life. And that scared the shit out of me. It didn't exactly scare me straight or anything, it just scared the shit out of me. Was I looking at myself 30 years in the future? Jesus Christ, I hope not. Chris helped me make a very important decision in life. And that was to never ever turn out to be like him. Thanks, Chris. It's hard for me to believe that he might still be alive, but if he is, I hope he's still drunk and eating all the pooty tat sauce he can find. If he's not, well, I would have been honored to be the only person at his funeral.